intense psychological study of people, objects, and their surroundings, coupled with an earnest Christian devotion, fueled Rembrandt's life and work. Incredibly gifted as an artist from a very young age, he became a master of portraits of all types: historical, biblical, and mythological scenes, as well as simple, charming, but dramatic landscapes. He used many types of materials and techniques with unusual sensitivity and spontaneity to develop his message. His approaches to composition, color usage, and shadow were ever-changing to produce the most powerfully moving but most natural moments of human existence. His supreme mastery of light and texture to emphasize emotional depth weaved a common theme through all of his creations, cementing his status as one of art's greatest innovative masters. These qualities are evident from his large, ambitious early history paintings to his more intimate and glowing later style. The iconic genius is generally regarded as the most important artist in Dutch art history, as his work epitomized the great period of wealth and cultural achievement known as the Dutch Golden Age. Rembrandt van Rijn was the eighth of 9 or more children born to Harmen van Rijn, a corn miller, and Cornelia van Zuidbroek, a baker's daughter. The prosperous family lived in Leiden near the Rhine River, originally called the Van Rijn River, and dedicated themselves to religion and education. Cornelia often read the scriptures to her children, which provided a strong sense of God, man, and nature for the young and profoundly Christian Rembrandt. Rembrandt's parents recognized his talents as a young child, so they sent him, from age 7 to 14, to the Latin school in Leiden for a classical education. He received the best education that an academic city in Holland could provide for a child with a deep interest in literature and scripture. He was duly prepared for admission to the University of Leiden, a fine institution. He entered the university as Rembrandtus Hermanni Leidenis and signed early paintings as RHL, but after a few months he withdrew to dedicate himself to art. Rembrandt secured a 3-year apprenticeship with Jacob Swanenberg, who taught him the fundamentals of painting, drawing, and etching. When he was still in his teens, his father sent him to Amsterdam to study with Peter Lastman, a skilled Italian painter of historical scenes. Lastman had studied the works of Caravaggio and Eisheimer, a German painter living in Rome. After several months, Rembrandt had mastered the techniques of chiaroscuro as well as the use of bright, glossy colors and posing figures with theatrical gestures. Lastman also influenced Rembrandt to concentrate on historical and religious scenes, although the local art buyers preferred scenes from their daily lives. As Paul Nemo quoted in his 1975 Rembrandt drawings, the young Rembrandt felt strongly about his subjects, saying, "Painting is the grandchild of nature. It is related to God." At the age of 18 or 19, Rembrandt returned to Leiden to set up his own studio. He looked more refined, dressed well, and worked closely with a student 6 years younger, Jan Lievens, who had also studied under Lastman. Rembrandt began his artistic journey with a remarkable display of talent and originality. Among his earliest known surviving works is The Senses, a series of 5 oil paintings created around 1624 or 1625, when the artist was only about 18 or 19 years old. This series, comprising allegorical depictions of sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch, not only reveals Rembrandt's emerging technical skills, but also offers an early glimpse into his lifelong fascination with the human condition, emotion, and realism. Each painting in the senses represents one of the 5 human faculties through vivid genre scenes rather than abstract personifications. The titles assigned to the works in modern scholarship are A Peddler Selling Spectacles, Sight, 3 Singers, Hearing, Unconscious Patient, Allegory of Smell, The Operation, Allegory of Touch, and a now-lost work presumed to have depicted taste. Despite their small-scale and youthful execution, these paintings demonstrate the young Rembrandt's developing mastery in composition, character portrayal, and psychological nuance. In A Peddler Selling Spectacles, a man attempts to place eyeglasses onto an elderly woman, symbolizing the restoration or perhaps imposition of vision. The gesture may suggest a broader allegory, the idea of seeing clearly as a metaphor for wisdom or enlightenment. Meanwhile, 3 Singers presents a group of expressive figures mid-song, their animated faces and open mouths capturing the auditory experience of music and the social nature of hearing. Unconscious Patient, also known as the Allegory of Smell, is perhaps the most dynamic and dramatic of the group. It depicts a man being revived with smelling salts, his unconscious state broken by the pungent stimulant. The scene is visceral and immediate, emphasizing smell as a physical, almost violent sensory force. Similarly, The Operation, representing touch, shows a medical procedure being performed a moment both intimate and uncomfortable, grounding the sense of touch in pain, precision, and corporeal reality. Though the painting for taste is now lost, scholars have speculated about its content based on the thematic consistency of the others. It likely featured a scene involving eating or drinking, rendered with the same earthy realism that characterizes the rest of the series. Stylistically, these works prefigure many of Rembrandt's mature characteristics. While the lighting is relatively even compared to his later dramatic Chiaroscuro, the focus on facial expression, human interaction, and narrative clarity is already present. The compositions are simple but effective, often centering the action closely and eliminating distractions. This approach reflects Rembrandt's early interest in Troni's studies of expressive faces that would continue throughout his career. Moreover, the Senses series provides valuable insight into the cultural and artistic environment of early 17th century Leiden. Genre scenes and allegorical subjects were popular among middle-class Dutch patrons, who favored art that was relatable and morally instructive. Rembrandt's choice to render the senses through common folk rather than mythological or idealized figures aligns with this preference and reveals his ability to respond to market demand without compromising creative vision. The Senses stands as a crucial milestone in Rembrandt's artistic development. These paintings, though created at the dawn of his career, already contain the seeds of his future greatness: a sensitivity to human emotion, a commitment to realism, and a boldness in concept. They mark the awakening of a genius whose work would forever change the course of Western art. The stoning of St. Stephen marks the official beginning of Rembrandt van Rijn's artistic career. Completed in 1625, when the Dutch painter was only 19 years old, it is widely regarded as his first signed work, and it offers a compelling glimpse into the genius that would later define one of the most influential painters in Western art. Executed in oil on a wooden panel and currently housed in the Musée des Beaux-Arts de Lyon, the painting represents both a religious meditation and a technical exercise. Drawing inspiration from biblical text, contemporary art influences, and Rembrandt's emerging visual language. This work is inspired by the martyrdom of Saint Stephen, the first Christian martyr as recounted in Acts 7:54-60. A young deacon in the early Christian community of Jerusalem, Stephen was condemned to death by stoning after being accused of blasphemy. Rembrandt chose to represent the precise moment when Stephen, dragged outside the city by his accusers, is being stoned by a crowd of roughly 20 figures. As he suffers the assault, Stephen utters his final words to Christ, and Rembrandt dramatizes this divine communication through a striking use of light. A celestial radiance surrounds the martyr, suggesting the heavens have opened above him. The scene encapsulates the tension between earthly brutality and spiritual transcendence, a dichotomy that would preoccupy Rembrandt throughout his career. The composition reflects the young artist's awareness of contemporary artistic influences, particularly the dramatic realism of Caravaggio and the refined narrative clarity of Adam Elsheimer. These influences are visible in both the painting's structure and its lighting. The scene is divided into two distinct zones, separated by a diagonal composition that creates a strong chiaroscuro effect. On the left, a man on horseback is cloaked in shadow, while on the right, St. Stephen and his assailants are bathed in bright light. This interplay between darkness and illumination not only guides the viewer's eye, but also reinforces the spiritual symbolism at the heart of the work. The light surrounding Stephen affirms his sanctity and links the physical violence of martyrdom with the promise of divine salvation. In the background sits Saul of Tarsus, later known as St. Paul, calmly observing the execution while holding the garments of the stoners. This faithful biblical detail is layered into the narrative, emphasizing both the historical moment and the transformative journey Saul would eventually undergo. While the composition is ambitious, it also reveals signs of Rembrandt's youth. Drawing inaccuracies are visible in certain areas, including some distortions in anatomy and perspective. However, these technical imperfections are overshadowed by the painting's emotional intensity and narrative complexity. A particularly notable element of the painting is Rembrandt's early exploration of self-portraiture. Scholars have identified up to 7 variations of his own face embedded within the crowd of figures, an unusually introspective choice for such a young artist. One figure, located just behind Stephen, appears to be a self-portrait, rendered within the larger composition much like Diego Velázquez would later do in Las Meninas. Biblical scholar John Durham suggests that Rembrandt presents himself here as a somewhat alarmed presence, a participant who may be having second thoughts about what was taking place. This interpretation positions the artist not merely as an observer, but as a moral witness, uncertain of his role in the unfolding violence. By inserting himself into the scene multiple times, Rembrandt confronts the ethical weight of martyrdom and human cruelty, suggesting a profound personal engagement with the subject. Stylistically, The stoning of St. Stephen showcases many of the themes and methods that would become central to Rembrandt's later work. His use of expressive facial detail, dramatic lighting, and theatrical composition all point to an evolving mastery of visual storytelling. More importantly, the painting highlights his preoccupation with the psychological and spiritual dimensions of his subjects, a trait that would come to define his mature religious works. The stoning of St. Stephen is far more than a student exercise or early experiment. It is a deeply ambitious, emotionally charged work that marks the beginning of Rembrandt's career with powerful themes of faith, violence, moral conflict, and divine grace. Drawing on the artistic traditions of Caravaggio and Elsheimer while laying the groundwork for his own unique voice, Rembrandt used this biblical narrative not only to showcase his emerging skills, but also to insert himself both literally and spiritually into the great moral and existential questions of his time. Among the earliest religious paintings attributed to Rembrandt van Rijn, Let the Little Children Come to Me, also known as Suffer the Little Children to Come unto Me, stands out as a poignant reflection on divine compassion and human innocence. Believed to have been painted in Leiden during the 1620s, this work reflects Rembrandt's formative years, when he was still developing his technical vocabulary and narrative style. Though the attribution remains debated, the painting reveals many characteristics of the young Rembrandt's vision, particularly his psychological sensitivity, narrative clarity, and deep moral imagination. The painting is inspired by a passage from the Gospel of Mark 10:13-16, in which Jesus, when the disciples attempt to turn children away, commands, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these." This scene affirms the spiritual value of innocence and childlike trust. Rembrandt, or the artist to whom this work is attributed, renders this moment not as a lofty, celestial event, but as a scene grounded in human warmth and accessibility. Christ is typically depicted seated at the center, extending a blessing to a group of small children, while mothers, followers, and onlookers gather around. The emotional core of the painting lies not in grandeur, but in tender interaction. A child reaching out, a mother offering her infant, Jesus welcoming them with gentle eyes and outstretched hands. The theological message is translated into visual language that invites empathy. The painting's composition is intimate and compact, with closely grouped figures filling the frame. This choice not only reflects Rembrandt's early style during his Leiden period, but also enhances the sense of emotional closeness. The lighting is soft and warm, lacking the bold chiaroscuro of his later works, but still subtly guiding the viewer's eye toward the central figure of Christ and the children. The palette leans toward earthy tones, reinforcing the naturalism that would later become one of Rembrandt's trademarks. One of the distinctive traits of this painting, if it is indeed by Rembrandt, is its genre-like realism. The figures are dressed in contemporary 17th century clothing, grounding the sacred story within familiar, everyday imagery. This technique aligns with the Protestant artistic culture of the Dutch Republic, which favored personal piety and accessible representations of biblical scenes over grandiose iconography. Even in this early phase, the artist displays a remarkable command of emotional nuance. Jesus is not portrayed as an aloof divine authority, but rather as a deeply human presence kind, approachable, attentive. His facial expression exudes empathy, while the varied reactions of the surrounding figures' curiosity, reverence, hesitation add to the painting's psychological complexity. This attention to human emotion is one of the defining characteristics of Rembrandt's oeuvre. In works such as The Return of the Prodigal Son or The Raising of Lazarus, he would later explore the full spectrum of spiritual and emotional transformation. Let the Little Children Come to Me appears to anticipate this trajectory, revealing a young artist already attuned to the inner lives of his subjects. Painted during the artist's early Leiden years, this work shows clear evidence of influence from his teacher Peter Lastman, especially in the narrative organization and classical posturing of some figures. Yet it also departs from Lastman's more theatrical style in favor of greater emotional realism and restraint. Furthermore, the painting's theme, Christ embracing society's most vulnerable, aligns with one of Rembrandt's lifelong concerns: the dignity of the marginalized. In later decades, he would return to similar subjects: beggars, elderly people, or biblical figures in moments of weakness or grace. In that sense, Let the Little Children Come to Me serves as a quiet thematic foundation for much of what was to come. Though some scholars question whether the painting is truly by Rembrandt, others point to its stylistic affinities, particularly in facial modeling and composition, as evidence of his hand. If not by Rembrandt himself, it likely emerged from his close circle, reflecting shared values and approaches in early 17th century Dutch religious art. Let the Little Children Come to Me is a work of subtle power and enduring relevance. Whether definitively by Rembrandt or not, the painting embodies the values he would later champion: intimacy, empathy, and spiritual humanity. It turns a moment of scripture into a scene of everyday grace, where divine love is made visible through human gesture and connection. As such, it marks an important step in the evolution of one of the most compassionate and perceptive artists in the history of Western painting.